anyway, a little bit about me. I've been in architecture for 15 years or so. Before that, I did film photography and visual art in Los Angeles. I worked in the film industry. I'm going to actually share this lovely kind of flow chart that I did for NCARB. I was on the Rethink Tank, and they had, how did you get to architecture? This is how I got to architecture. It's a lot of little words because it was kind of a longer, weird path for me. And this is one of the things that happens a lot with Black women architects. If we aren't exposed to it early in our lives, we come to it later because, you know, it's just growing up, it was like there are three things you can be: doctor, lawyer, teacher, oh, nurse, maybe if you want, if you don't mind dealing with people and blood. And that's pretty much it. So like there's a whole world of careers that just I wasn't exposed to growing up. And that happens in all different walks of life, I think. And I think it happens less now with the internet. I was pre-internet, so it was the local library or nothing. Anyway, few things I want to highlight on this is that, you know, in 2008, when we had the great recession breakdown of all things, I considered leaving architecture altogether, and somehow managed not to fall out the track. And then the other thing was, you know, I gave up on exams for essentially 3 years in the middle of my testing because I didn't have support. And it wasn't like I didn't have any family drama or trying to raise kids or anything. There was like way less happening in my life. I just didn't have the mental capacity to take care of it. So I lost my share screen. I'm gonna stop sharing now. So that's a little bit about me, and I was licensed in 2018. So I'm fairly new with the licensure, but with a lot of experience behind me. Anyway, so moving on. There's not going to be a lot of slides in this talk, probably mostly because the slides that I thought were really interesting were charts and graphs, and they don't work very well in Zoom. They're just kind of boring. But if you are interested in charts and graphs, I would really recommend looking at the 2021 edition of NCARB by the Numbers and the 2020 joint study NCARB did with NOMA, which is the Baseline on Belonging report, which has a lot of statistics about people of color, women of color in the architectural and related fields. But now we're going to go to poll question number 1. So Kelly, if you could launch that. There we go. Well, we have both questions at the same time. So, okay, do both of them then. And you can't count me even if you've worked with me, and there's a reason for that I'll tell you a little bit later. So give it another couple of minutes. I can't see the results, so Kelly's going to have to disclose the results once everybody has voted.
Yeah, I don't have those results either.
Okay, tell me what you'd like, when you'd like me to tell you what they say.
Do we have like the bulk of the people on screen
We
response?
17 out of 20, so I'd say that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say that's good. What are our results, please, with the drum roll?
Okay, for question number 1, how many Black people have you worked with professional during your career? 6% say 0 Black people, 59% say 1 to 5, 18% say 6 to 10, and 18% say more than 10.
That is actually higher than I anticipated, honestly. It does matter where you do your work. So if you do work like a lot of work on the East Coast, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, you will find higher concentrations of Black people in architecture and the related fields. But you know, kind of out here in the Southwest, there's just not very many of us. So, and then for question number 2, What do we got for that, Kelly?
For question number 2, how many Black professional women have you worked with during your professional career? 12% say 0 Black people. 76% say 1 to 5. 12% say 6 to 10. And 0 say more than 10.
Okay. That's kind of more of what I expected for the first question, because, you know, there's not very many Black licensed architects in the United States. And then when you get into Black licensed women, it's 0.4% of the whole licensed population of the 55 jurisdictions that NCARB covers. That's under 600 people. All the Black women architects would fit in a room or in an auditorium that only requires 3 exits. That's kind of insane when you think there's over 116,000 other architects licensed in those jurisdictions. Why is that? It's not because, you know, we haven't been in the field of architecture. You know, the first licensed Black architect, female, you know, she was licensed in 1942 in Illinois. It was Beverly L. Green. She was 26, and she'd been practicing without a license, because you could do that at the time, for a number of years before that. She worked with Marcel Brewer. She's like I mean, her CV is really awesome. But, you know, 1942. Licensed to work. She's got a portfolio of built work. And then Norma Fairweather, she was Norma Sarlick. She was New York State's first Black female architect, licensed in 1954. She was also the first African-American woman member of the AIA, by the way. And then there were like at least 3 women who practiced architecture before Green got licensed as the first. And that's Elizabeth Carter Brooks, Amaza Lee Meredith, and Ethel Madison Furman. There's probably more that we don't know about because their work was either, you know, attributed to somebody else. They worked in a milieu that was not considered architecture because it was vernacular, or it's since been lost. There's a really great website called pioneeringwomen.bwaf.org, where it has like a whole bunch of women, not just of color, and what their first were, their biographies. It's really a great rabbit hole to go down if you've got some time. But, you know, if we've had Black women architects licensed since 1942 in the country, why aren't there more of us? You know, what are the reasons that you don't see us? Is it because the general perception publicly of architecture is the white guy with the black spectacles and the turtleneck who lives in a house on the hill in California with the infinity pool that none of us can afford anyway? Is it because architecture is looked at as something that, you know, is for a certain class of people in a certain area? It's only institutional and it doesn't count for some people. Why aren't there more architects of color, Black women, Black men, Native American men, Native American women? Where are all the minorities? Why doesn't architecture reflect the percentage of those minority people that is actually in the public? If our job is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, why doesn't the profession look like the public? I don't have a good answer for that. It's weird that stuff like that is still happening. Like, you know, first woman licensed in New York in 1954. One of my coworkers just got licensed. She's the first Black woman licensed in her state. Guess what that state is? It's Colorado. Really? Colorado is like the, bastion of like liberal, like everybody inclusive, let's do stuff for everybody kind of stuff. Why do they only have one Black woman architect? I don't know. How many Black women architects do we have in the state of Nevada? I don't actually know. And the reason I don't know is because, our AIA chapter doesn't actually keep those statistics. And when you go on some of the websites that list, Black and African American architects, it's out of date. I've been licensed for 4 years. I'm not on there. I can't count their numbers as being accurate. So, but I would guess that there's less than 5 of us in this state. And that would be probably being generous. We have a decent population of Black people in Nevada. It's not like we're an all-white state, So what happened? So I don't know what happened. I think a lot of it is exposure early and understanding the value of design from an earlier age. And, that's true of everybody, really. In order to get the value of the profession recognized, we got to get it recognized earlier and earlier that, hey, design is a thing that is worth something. And it's not just worth your iPhone or your sneakers or your latest little black dress. The design of the places where you spend the bulk of your time is worth something. All neighborhoods spend time in the buildings that they're in. All neighborhoods are worth something. All neighborhoods deserve architects that reflect that worth. But we don't see it. A lot of times in, communities of color, you get top-down design. The architects come in, some of them don't talk to the community about what they need, what they want, what worked for them before, what didn't work for them before, and it's just, here, have a project. And you've seen, famous urban failures of that. So could some of those famous urban failures have been famous urban successes if there'd been people who look like the people who live in them, designing them, giving input in them, working with the community about how it all comes together? Would that community have felt valued and understood the value that architecture is bringing to reflect them in those spaces? Something worth thinking about, right? The other thing that I think is really important when you think about architects of color, Black architects in particular, is that Black America is not a monolith. Like a lot of times it's like, oh, the African American experience. Well, that's super vast. Like I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in a town with 3 stoplights, 2 Black families. I was the only Black girl I knew until I went to college. That's my African American experience. Somebody else's African American experience could be rural in a mostly Black area. So their whole rural community experience is going to be completely different than mine. But they're still the African American experience. Black does not equal urban. Urban does not equal Black. That is something I think that gets lost a lot in the translation of what African American is in the United States and how it's reflected in the culture, how it's reflected in design, how it's reflected in the people who do all of those things. So, I don't know. There's there's many ways to be Black as there are people. There are many ways to be an architect as there are architects. If you take the two of them together and mash them, you get something beautiful, but we just don't have enough of that beauty being reflected in what we build. And I don't know how to fix it. I can suggest, you know, getting into the schools. I can suggest making outreach into, you know, historical Black colleges and universities. I can suggest talking to your Black neighbor across the street and seeing if they have any interest in anything that you might be doing and find out what they might be doing, because they might need an architect. They just might not know they need an architect because they don't know what architects do. The general public has no idea what we do most of the time. They think architecture is for, you know, the buildings on the strip and the stadiums, and, you know, not for, you know, the coffee shop down the block. You know, not for finding a solution to help out the portable units at the underfunded school that can't afford to build an addition. There's so much to unpack with all of this, and it's, you know, part and parcel with all of the Jedi stuff that's starting to happen now, which is really exciting. And at the same time, it's also kind of like, well, you don't want to get lost in all the Jedi stuff for the sake of Jedi stuff. It's great, it's useful, it has its place. But when push comes to shove, I just want to be an architect. You know, I don't want to have to worry about the Black in front of my name or the woman in front of my name. Like, I just want to do really good work. I want to be recognized for that really good work. And I want everybody who looks like me and like you to also be recognized for that really good work. Because at the end of the day, we all bleed the same color. We all want to be happy. We all want our children to be happy. We all want our neighbors to be happy, unless you happen to hate them, which is a wholly other story. And I'm not going to get involved in that feud. But, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's just, when you think about what society is, who is in your society? Who do you interact with on a daily basis? Do you interact with Black people? Do you interact with Asian American people? Do you interact with Native American people? Do you interact with disabled people or neurodivergent people on a regular basis? What can they bring to your design if you start to talk to them, have those conversations on the regular, get those different lenses and different voices into the work? You know, you're really cool, I think. I mean, have you really thought about what's missing from your bubble? How to step outside of your bubble? Like, not just once in a while, but like incrementally, and make your bubble bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's everybody. Because we do that to ourselves, you know. People are creatures of habit. You got your coffee shop, you get your coffee, you see the same people all the time. You have your friends that you talk to who are nearby, and your friends who are far away, and you talk to them. But when was the last time you made a new friend? You know, when was the last time you tried something outside your comfort zone? Speaking of comfort zone, I meant to get to this earlier. There is a really interesting documentary on Netflix currently. It is called Coded Bias. And it is essentially about AI and how it impacts our bubbles. And how it impacts our bubbles, and we have no idea that it's impacting our bubbles. So for instance, if you have an AI and it's screening job resumes, right? And it has learned that, you know, historically, this particular profile is very successful at the job that you are posting for. it's going to look for that same profile. If that profile doesn't include women, doesn't include people of color, it's not going to look for them. It's not going to prioritize them. It's just going to keep doing the same thing it's been doing over and over and over again. So if it says, oh, architects are white guys, that AI is going to be like, white guy, yes. Oh, person whose name I can't pronounce, probably not a white guy. No. White guy, yes. Person whose name I can't pronounce, no. Person whose name sounds like it needs to be spelled differently, no. Like, it's like that's what's happening in the background. So, people of color are being disadvantaged by a machine to not even get their foot in the door, which is really interesting because, by having that first machine step, that machine is perpetuating the problem. But the people aren't aware that the machine is perpetuating the problem because it's happening in a black box. So how do we break the box and still use the tools? Because the tool is only as good as the data that you give it. The machine doesn't seem to understand that, like, there's always new data. People understand there's always new data. There's new people. There's chances that need to be given. And there's chances that need to be taken. And there's challenges that need to be met. But the AI just knows this has been successful before. This will be successful again. This has been successful before. This will be successful again. So I guess my question to you is, what should success look like? Should it look like the machine success? Should it look like something that's completely different? Should it be a collaboration of people, ideas, places, and machine things? How do you by-step the machine, but still take advantage of all the power that machine learning and processing can give us? How do we as designers acknowledge the built-in biases of the coders, who are mostly white and male, on everything that we do that a machine is attached to? Kind of an interesting question, isn't it? So, okay, Keith wants to know what ethnicities of applicants to SO school. Is that just supposed to be architecture school?
School of Architecture is what UNLV is.
School of Architecture. That's actually a pretty interesting question, and I have the data for that. So 44% of applicants to architecture schools across the country are people of color. Great, right? 29% of them go on to take the exams. Not so great. Of that 29%, even less of them finished the exams. And then you wind up with a 0.4% of Black women architects. So that's who gets into the schools. I'm not sure what the percentages are of applicants who are straight up rejected because they, either don't have the grade point average, they don't have the portfolio skills, they don't have the connections, they don't have the money, you know, and or they don't know even to apply. Anybody have any thoughts? Because I'm getting tired of talking.
You see Dawn's comment there, Coffee?
Yes. Community outreach to show young girls the profession. Yes. So yeah, so if you can get involved in any of the AIA, like student competition stuff, do it. We did it here at Cunningham, I don't know, a number of years ago. The first year we did it, the teacher called us up and said that she had never seen some of the girls in her class so excited because there were people who looked like her, looked like them, coming to critique their work. And that woman that I mentioned earlier, the first licensed Black woman in Colorado, I went to our office, I don't know, number of years ago, and I met her. And she told me the day after she got licensed that she was so excited because I was the first Black woman licensed architect that she had ever met. And it blew my mind because, you know, I don't think about being, you know, kind of that example all the time. I just want to do my job. But, you know, part of my job is to be that example and to get out there and to do stuff and to volunteer for NCARB and, like, you know, help make sure that, you know, exam process actually takes people like me into the equation, and to bring up some of these really kind of uncomfortable but seems obvious to me but isn't kind of things.
Hey, Coffee? We're
Yeah.
talking behind your, oh, well, I guess we're kind of in front of you over here. When, talk about the person or what you were doing at the time when you decided to go to architecture school.
I was working on the pilot for CSI, I think it was, in the art department. And my boss at the time, a Yale trained architect, art director, because, you know, he decided he didn't like dealing with clients. He'd rather deal with really persnickety directors for whatever reason. And so, you know, I was talking to him about, you know, I am tired of finding a new job every 3 months. Art department's not for me. Like, it's, you know, I did special effects and stuff, and that was fun for a while, but I'm kind of tired of not having any power. I'm kind of tired of, you know, being the only or one of the onlys all the time. And it makes me laugh now because he's like, well, you have all the skills, you should be an architect. So I was like, I don't know anything about architects. Let me go find out what that all entails. And it seemed to line up with my interests and my skill set, but not necessarily with not being the only. I went to SciArc. I went to the program that they have for non-bachelor architects, non-architectural bachelors for their master's program. In my program, there were 2 Black women. It was me and a lady from Ethiopia. And I think at the school at the time, there was 1 Black woman in the undergrad. So there were 3 of us at SciArc. And that was weird. But again, since I'm from Western Pennsylvania and was the only Black girl until I went to college, not terribly unusual for me. So, you know, went through that. decided architecture was awesome. And yeah, the rest is like a struggle through at the time IDP, and is now AXP, and then exams and the rolling clock and freaking out and failing and passing, and ethics exam with this all the statutes from the board office, and but here I am.
So here you are. Yay. Yay. So when we're talking about the other day with Anna, we were talking about how the rest of us, how everyone can support emerging young Black professionals. How do we do that? Like, there's the exposure thing, right? So
Yeah.
in the JEDI committee, they're working on how to do more outreach, right, into schools, and which I think is really interesting. But then also, like, what else? What are some other ideas we can do? We have community outreach. Dawn mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about lobbying for media representation of Black women architects.
I like that idea though. Like if Shonda Rhimes would put somebody in one of her shows that was Black woman architect, man, those numbers would go up quick.
Didn't think we're not common. I mean, you don't see us much as women architects anyway, right? Or architects in TV. So wow, just to see a woman, a Black woman architect would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like really any like popular show.
Lawyers and Cop.
So, but I guess the easiest thing is to ask. You know, like ask your EDU compatriots if they have anybody that like, you know, would be good to talk to, or, you know, is looking for a mentor, or, you know, just has questions. You know, be supportive of those that you find, like, you know, because the thing is, people don't know you want to help unless you put yourself out there. And the people who are usually struggling the most are too busy struggling to ask for help. So this isn't a call for like adopt a Black architect week or anything like that. But you know, there's ways to make the profession kind of more welcoming. Like, you know, don't act surprised when somebody says they want to be an architect. Like that happens a lot. Like, and it's all communities. Like I was working on a casino in Louisiana, and I would go down there and I would, you know, they'd be like, oh, or, you know, what are you doing? Are you like, you know, because I'm walking around in my vest and my hard hat. And they're like, why are you here? I'm like, well, I'm the architect. You're an architect? It's like some alien landed from outer space. But, you know, it's a teaching moment. Yeah, I'm an architect. Don't you have to be really good at math for that? No, I have consultants that are really good at math, and I have a computer and a calculator. You need to understand the basics, but yeah, I haven't touched a sign since high school, or a tangent or anything. I got stuff that does that for me. So, so, you know, I mean, that's making architecture not like some mysterious wizardry is key. Because it's right now, it's for a lot of people, architects are like somewhere up in some glorified tower that they can't approach. They don't understand how to get there. They don't understand what weirdness we do. Just that somehow buildings magically come out of the ground. Because they understand what construction is. But that gap between like construction and what we do, that's the part people are like, what? You don't just build it? No, they don't just build it. We design it, and we draw it, we model it, we throw it at them. They start to build it. They give us a bunch of paperwork to say, hey, is this the right material? And we say yes or no. And off we go. So I think, you know, that outreach, I think if it could be tied to stuff that's being built in neighborhoods, like if we could get contractors on board with like having kind of like mini open houses, even if it's like outside the fence, staring through the hole at whatever it is that they're building, and have the architect there with the contractor to explain how it all works. You get all ages that way because, you know, people are standing in front of a fence looking at a hole through a hole at what's being built. You get all the neighbors out because they all want to know, what is that? What is happening there? What's scheduled for that? Like, what cool machinery am I gonna see? You know, and can I work on it? Probably. So yeah, I think most of it is demystifying what we do as architects so that we're not like the weird wizards behind the Revit model or wandering around on the job site with an iPad and a hard hat and a yellow vest, but not dirty.
Doing the non-tangible thing.
Because, you know, they're like, that's what happens. Like, they're construction people. Yeah, I get what they do. They've got their hands in all of it, but you know.
Well, another thing we had talked about, the idea of breaking down boundaries, that idea of disadvantaged Black woman making her way, but really flipping that over into a strength.
Oh yeah.
How good of
Yeah.
you that you made it so far in your disadvantaged position.
Right. But like, seriously? Like, that's a superpower. That's not a disadvantage. Like, you could take all the stuff that you weren't handed or given or learned and still manage like that. What can you do with a project? Like, I want to know. Like, you managed to do that on a shoestring and a dime and a piece of toast? Yeah, bring that mentality to my project. I want to know what you can do with a shoestring, a dime, and a piece of toast on this project. And then, you know, you take that mentality and you throw money at it. Dang, you're going to get something super amazing because it's going to be optimized and, you know, refined, and like, it's a whole other lens that happens when you come from a place of like habitual frugality and make doedness, and then suddenly you're released, like, not have those constraints, but they're ingrained in you. So you'll still use those constraints just in a different way in service to the project. So it's not about, you know, necessarily overcoming what's perceived as a disadvantage. It's about using it to your advantage because it's kind of amazing and not everybody has that skill set. And that's true of a lot of things. You know, English as a second language, that's a superpower. You know, like, extreme poverty, though uncomfortable growing up, like, you learn that as a superpower. The army brats who move a lot, that's a superpower. Like, you've been to so many different places and experienced so many different spaces and how they operate and what happens with them. Use it. You know, everybody's experience has awesome diamonds that you don't think are diamonds because they're so covered in mud, and your own kind of like self-taught story of that was horrible. How do you flip it on its head so it's not horrible? And instead, it's something magical that you can use, and transform, share with the world.
So I was just looking through, see if there were any more questions, to see if anyone had anything to offer there in terms of a question. but I don't see anything else here. Anyone have any questions directly to Coffee?
This is the ask me anything part. No,
I'm
nobody
gonna
has
use my
anything.
computer changing in the background.
I'll ask a question. Coffee, who did you look up to when you first started your career in the profession?
I looked up to people who are not in the profession, honestly, because I didn't know where to look for people who looked like me. I didn't know where the trailblazers were. So I looked outside of the profession at other trailblazers and kind of used them as my role models. And my mom, because she's a badass. So, but yeah, I think, because I was coming up, really before the internet was the super powered thing that it is now. If it wasn't readily available and easily findable at the public library, it didn't exist. And when you go to a school that is majority white, they're not teaching you about Black people in architecture, and they're certainly not talking about Black women architects in those schools. So that's another thing that we can support through the schools, is just exposing, just point people in the right direction. Honestly, like, people are hungry for this information, and a lot of times it's just they don't know it exists and they don't know where to find it. So when you point people in the right direction, like, man, it's like the Energizer Bunny, they'll just keep going. And they'll keep going. They'll do awesome stuff. They become part of that perpetual cycle of doing awesome stuff, being the example for the next behind them, and until such a point where it's no longer remarkable. I mean, that's the goal, right?
So I guess a few things we could do is we need to take care of our college students, for one, because probably a lot of us, well, probably some of us know college students. But also I was looking at this link that Dawn sent over for CSN. We can't all get involved in all of this stuff, but it's something to think about, right? Is becoming a mentor for, or two, I'm sorry, to different women, different people in our colleges locally, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you don't even have to mentor. Like, I mean, you could be the connector of mentors. So that's, if you help build those bridges, that's useful too. If you don't have the time to be a mentor, hook somebody up with somebody else up that and that's true inside and outside of school. Like, professionally, like, once you're outside of academia and you get your license, there are a lot of firms that don't really support emerging architects, especially emerging architects of color. They get lost in the firm and they don't have support. So sometimes they just need like somebody in their corner to remind them why they did this, when it's not, because sometimes it's not fun. We all know this. Sometimes you have that job that is just like the worst job on the face of the planet. You're just like, oh God, please make it be over so I can go to the next one. And if it's one of those long multi-year ones, like, those are the ones that drive people out. But
That's
you
true.
can, but like, if they know somebody's in their corner, you will get through this. It will be fine. Like, I know it's terrible, but this project will end and there will be something better. Sometimes that's all people need to hear.
So Coffee, as we're wrapping up, because we're really close to the end, give us a couple of things that you've been working on and what you really like about what you do. That's coming from, thank you, Lori.
Oh, I'm working on a couple of things right now. I'm finishing up construction admin on a homeless shelter at Catholic Charities. So that will be done in July. So they're a really good client, so I enjoy working with them. And then I've got a restaurant on the Strip, which I'm working on. We just started that, so that's a TI. And then, you know, fingers crossed, we get released for a super large project on the Strip. You may have seen the site between Fountain Drew and Sahara. So 27 acres of fun time happening very soon.
Very cool. And so what do you like about all of that?
I really like big projects. I like big, complex, multiple moving parts, stuff that's gone sideways and is on fire, headed towards the nearest oil refinery. That's kind of my jam. I like to fix things that are broken. And then, you know, it's more fun to fix them after they've gone off the rails than to try and prevent them going off the rails in the first place. But yeah, the firm thinks it's more valuable to like prevent it from going off the rails in the first place. So that's where I'm at right now, instead of being smoke jumper and rescuing the things that have gone sideways. So yeah, that's it's just the fast paced daily rate of change. That's what I love about architecture. Like, come in and even if you're doing like a bunch of franchises, it's never the same job twice.
And I think that's what kids need to hear from us as well, is the kinds of things we do, the fun parts of what we do, because you don't want to tell them about the boring things unless they really enjoy writing proposals. And then, or billing. But also tell them about like how things change every single day. Because in my career, I don't do the same job. That's what's so nice about it.
Yeah, there's like, if you want a job where you are going to be challenged every day, you're going to learn new stuff every day, you're going to be surprised almost every day, this is the field for you.
But not a scary surprise. Some of them are, but not a scary surprise.
Even the scary surprises, like, they're solvable. Like, most of the time they're solvable. And that's, the fun bit is like, here, make a solution.
That is a really fascinating part about what we do, finding the solutions. Anyone else have anything for coffee before she jumps off? Before we all jump off?
Ninja, I saw a hand.
Yes, I really like the point where you mentioned about the media, or I think it was Don's comment in the chat feature about media. I own a very small newsletter. So Las Vegas doesn't have a lot of media outlets. And usually when there's a project that announced, they like to interview the developers or the brokerage firms. And there aren't many media coverage about the architects, the engineers, the construction crews behind the project. So we really need to maybe talk to the PR or marketing teams of these architecture firms, and how can we get more architects to be on media and have a diverse representation in media? Because I love the idea of the university outreach, and I also like to see more high school outreach if we want to get these kids to expose to this profession early. And local media is a great way to do that, because everybody watches TV or listen to the radio, or follow some kind of local social media news. So yeah, that's just something that I would like to add. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we should maybe look at as a committee, as AIA, Women in Architecture, is PBS has their summer STEAM camp every year. So, maybe if we get ahead of it enough, we could be somehow involved in that. Alexia, you have no sound.
Okay, does it work
There
now?
Yes.
There you go.
My headphones died in the meeting before, and I didn't change the settings. I thought it would automatically change, but it didn't. So I was just gonna say this was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. I think Coffee might be the only Black women architect that I know, that I actually know.
Nazarene is coming up behind me.
There was, I mean, like that I had more than one conversation with. Let's put it that way. Saw people in the conference, but that doesn't count, I think, because I don't really know them. And then while going to school, I don't think there was anyone in my years in graduate school. So, and we talked a lot about outreach. I think there was when we used to do the garden project at elementary school, when we all went and present to the kids what architects and landscape architects do. That was a really eye-opening experience from just going to different schools in different areas. And when we had the kids introduce themselves and tell us what they want to grow up becoming, it was drastic different kinds of answers if you're in a different neighborhood and you have a different mix of kids. So it really, like, I don't know how, like, should we be more, I'm sure there's some maybe Jedi is working on that. I don't know how they're exactly outreaching, but, how do we work with the local organizations who may not think about architects in their usual interactions? Do we get involved with the Boys and Girls Club or something else that, touches the kids' daily life to, be part of that experience? Because like you said, yeah, architects, even just regular public, don't really know what we do. I get the same reaction when I tell people that I'm architect. Exactly as you described. They just don't know, because you go to the doctors, you know what they do. You saw the lawyers on TV, you know what they do. I think there's only architect in How I Met Your Mother, and it's barely depicted in the show, and it's way off. So like there's nothing to go off unless you actually know someone in your life who's an architect and you talk about what you do.
There are actually lots of architects in Hollywood films, but they never
Yes.
show them being architects.
Right.
They just say they're architects. And
It's just a decoration of the role.
Places in Seattle,
Mike
there are
Brady, thank
a
you.
number of them where they tell them they're an architect, but they never see what they do.
Right. So I thought it was very good when you say, we all need to get out of our comfort zone and, meet new people and somehow get the idea of architecture in their life, because, that's the only way we can get, the 8 or 9-year-old kid to start thinking about maybe this is what they want to become. High school might be, still a good time, but by the time in college, it's getting harder and harder for people to get into it. It's not saying it's too late, because it's really never too late, as we can see here. Being bridge students, Coffee and I both didn't study architecture, and then we went to school for that. So it's never too late, but it's, it's always good to get into the idea in their minds earlier. So
the students, the student ASLA chapter, the American Society of Landscape Architects, the UNLV student chapter is doing outreach right now with some elementary schools. And so we could always help them do that if we wanted to. If anybody's interested, I can make the connection. We could always piggyback on to what they're doing and help explain the profession a little better, because they're students. They don't totally know the profession yet either, to be honest. So there's an opportunity there. And the garden project that Alexia had mentioned, we probably hit, I think it was close to 700 students that we got in front of during that time. And it was a 2-part program, and I always enjoyed it because at the beginning of the first day, we would ask them what they wanted to be when they grow up. And at the end of the second day, we would ask them again. And on the first day, most of them didn't know what we did, but by the time we had finished doing our site surveying and measuring and our charrette and our designs, we always had a few that were like, I want to be an architect now, or I want to be a landscape architect now. And so it works. So if we can maybe help some of the groups, the Jedi committee and maybe the student chapter committees that are already doing some of these things, to make sure that there's females and minorities being represented to the kids when they do these outreach events.
Yeah, we had one girl in our community projects that we were doing who wants to be an architect. So we gotta find her again and keep going. But Naz, you had a comment, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't want to keep you all long, but I was in the office. The talk was amazing. Thank you, Coffee. There's so many things that I want to say, but I think Anna and Alexia actually touched upon it, because I was hearing everyone talking about high school students. And the main point I was going to say was we should start even younger, start with little kids. Like my son from the age of 2, knowing what an architect is, just because, I'm there and he sees what I'm doing and he's interested and he wants to learn about all the construction vehicles, et cetera, and everything around it. So yeah, I think it's starting young, like even in preschool and kindergarten, and us ourselves in our little circles, social circles, the kids around us, making sure we talk to them about what we do. You find that there was a youth career that I had joined here in Seattle, and it was interesting because a lot of the kids knew about the medical field and engineering, but not what architecture is. And the kind of questions they asked would be like, do I have to be good at math? What kind of classes do I need to do? And they were more middle school and high school and above. But it was even interesting, even at that age, a lot of them had no idea what the background or what you need to do to become an architect. From me being an Arab, just another perspective. I think the color is not an issue, but the gender is, like for females, and to say I want to be an architect was also a very big, like normally they see architecture or engineering in general as more a male dominant profession rather than for a girl. So we found a lot of our girls don't have the knowledge about it because of that, because they don't see girls going into those kind of fields. Yeah, that's it. That's all I want to say, and say thank you to everybody. And it's so nice to hear all your voices and see your faces, and I miss you all.
Miss you too.
Yes, thanks. Adriana, did you still have something you wanted to comment on or ask? You had your hand up a few minutes ago.
Yeah, sorry. No, I kind of like the same thing. Can you hear me? I'm trying to put my video here, but anyway, for some reason I can't. Just wanted to say the same thing. Actually, Nasrin mentioned the structural engineers. We have to do the same thing that Kofi said. What do you do? Nobody gets it. Nobody understands. Architect, I would have thought, is more common than structural engineers. I guess you also have the same problem. As a woman, also foreign, I have an accent, so the whole thing also, it sounds very close to me what Kofi, was going through and mentioned. So that's all. And I'm working with Kofi now, so now I know her. And it's a pleasure to see you all. And yeah, let's try to make our professions, more. Let's go for it and get everybody to know what we do, and we are good. We are women, and we're good, and as men or better than men sometimes. So let's go for it. I know there is one guy here, but is it him?
He's trying not to be offended.
Yeah.
He's trying not to be.
Well, we bring another perspective for sure.
Christina, no one has mentioned Minecraft or environment building.
Oh, yeah, no, I just mentioned that because, I just look at the software platforms and, like kids, it's like, that's completely architecture. As far as relating to kids and to the younger generation, that and the other platforms like Roblox, that's all environment building. I mean, they have a relationship building, but there are entire platforms where these kids go in and completely build their own environment, and from a very young age. And I mean, it feels just like architecture. It feels like a version of what I do every day. So I think that there's probably a lot of interest, even though they don't necessarily know that's what it is.
Who is playing Minecraft, and who's doing that though? I mean, what kind
Kids.
of
I mean,
no,
kids.
no, what kind of kids? Are they all kids? Are they a variety of kids, diverse kind of kids?
Well, I only see it from sort of my own perspective, which is sort of my own kid, right? But these servers are very large, and there are very large numbers of them. So I'm sure there's probably demographics that are associated with this. But number one, it would be kids who have access to computers. So that's a smaller group probably in and of itself, but maybe not, depending on, how kids get on. I don't know. I mean, but as far as relating architecture to sort of younger groups, I mean, that's right there.
Sure. And TikTok, what architect is interesting enough to be on TikTok? Come on.
There's this one architect I follow. I follow a few of them. Oh, they're like a celebrity in Gen Z. I think that's why we need to leverage social media too. That's what kids like to be on. They don't watch TVs anymore. They're on TikTok 5 hours a day.
Man, TikTok architect. Now you got me looking for one.
I just sent a link.
One of my interior designers is over there running. It's just like, I'm on TikTok.
I just sent a link that says top 10 architecture influencers on TikTok, and these videos, they get millions of views, and lots of kids, they comment, and they're curious about the profession, and they would like to learn more about it. It's better for young people. They like to learn things through social media. They don't really trust TVs anymore, mainstream media.
There are 2 Americans on this list.
How many women?
Women, not sure. I assume that's a man because of the way it's written. There's 1 woman, 2, maybe 2 women, maybe 3. I don't know how everybody identifies, but 3 maybe.
Looks like 3.
Out of the 10. So interesting. Yeah, so what about those Black women architects on TikTok? Where are they? Coffee, where are they?
I have no idea. TikTok is, I can barely social media.
I think it's really up to the person. It's like a whole job if you really want to be one of those.
A whole job.
Like, I'm not ever gonna download TikTok, so
I can't even LinkedIn. So like I have it, it just sits there. I ignore it most of the time.
Yeah, what about those young architects, up and coming, emerging?
Okay, we gotta get on TikTok.
Oh,
We're getting on
fine.
TikTok today. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a fun note to end Coffee's discussion on.
So thank you guys for coming and listening to me babble. And you want to talk more about it? I'm generally open to having these sorts of discussions. So if you want to be uncomfortable, come
You're
talk
amazing.
to me.